secretly met with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un just a few weeks ago. Also tonight, in the middle of confusion over whether and when new sanctions would be imposed on Russia for its role in the suspected chemical attack on Syria, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations is pushing back in a big way against the White House. CNN's Jim Acosta joins us now with the latest on two major stories breaking tonight. First of all, what do we know about Director Pompeo's meeting with Kim Jong Un?
Well, the Washington Post was reporting this earlier this evening, but my colleagues Jeff Zeleny and Elise Labott have both confirmed that over the Easter weekend, Anderson, Mike Pompeo, the CIA director, who's also been nominated by the president to be the new Secretary of State, flew to North Korea, met with Kim Jong Un, with other intelligence officials, all of this obviously to try to set up this meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong Un. We heard the president earlier today saying he's not exactly sure whether or not that meeting is going to take place, but that these high-level talks are going on. And Anderson, there was one confusing moment earlier this evening when it sounded like the president said, yes, he in fact had spoken with Kim Jong Un, but in fact the White House later clarified to say no, that those talks had only been taking place between high-level officials, and now we found out who those high-level officials are. They include the CIA director, who may be the next Secretary of State.
Also, some stunning developments today in this whole sort of kerfuffle over Russian sanctions. The U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, on Sunday had announced on television, I believe it was on CBS on Face the Nation, saying that either that day or on Monday, that Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, was going to be announcing a new round of sanctions against Russians who were linked to the chemical stockpiles in Syria. The White House, then no sanctions were announced. What's been happening now just over the last day?
It's been some foreign policy whiplash. It's been going back and forth for a couple of days now, Anderson. As you said, Nikki Haley, the UN ambassador on Face the Nation on Sunday, warned essentially Russia that these sanctions were coming down on Monday. That did not happen. The White House distanced itself from that statement on Monday. And then today, Larry Kudlow, who's the president's new chief economist, stunned reporters at an off-camera briefing down here in Florida when he said that there was some confusion and that the UN ambassador had gotten ahead of the curve. That led Nikki Haley to put out a statement, and this was pretty remarkable, Anderson, because typically you don't get this kind of pushback from one administration official to another. Nikki Haley putting out a statement saying, I don't get confused. She might as well have been saying, bless his heart, because that was essentially saying, no, Larry Kudlow, you're wrong. And then earlier this evening, I was able to confirm through a couple of senior White House officials that Larry Kudlow had in fact called Nikki Haley to apologize and said during the course of that phone call that, well, the policy had changed since Nikki Haley spoke on Sunday and that nobody had kept her in the loop. And so a lot of confusion, a lot of whiplash over a very important issue. The president's having a press conference tomorrow night with Shinzo Abe, the Japanese prime minister, over at Mar-a-Lago. Obviously, this potential meeting with the North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un and the confusion over these Russian sanctions, I think, are very likely to come up.
Is it known at this point? I mean, is it the president who decided not to have these new sanctions go forward against Russia? Is it known at this point? Because the White House hasn't really said.
The White House has not said, and I know that you tried mightily last night with Hogan Gidley to try to get an answer out of this administration. We just haven't gotten one. But I think it was very clear on Sunday that Nikki Haley was leaning very forward in the direction of sanctions against Russia for their support of Bashar al-Assad in Syria and, of course, that chemical weapons attack that we saw earlier this month in Duma. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a policy change occurred. And according to what White House officials are telling us now, Larry Kudlow told Nikki Haley that that policy had changed and that nobody had told her about it. And so it was very striking to see Larry Kudlow say earlier today, well, there was some confusion. She got ahead of herself. And then, in fact, there appears to be a different story emerging, and that is that the policy had changed and that nobody had told her about it. Anderson, we're simply just not getting a straight answer out of this White House on that front.
And when it comes to the Michael Cohen investigation, do we know how the president, where his head is on it at this point?
Well, we know all last week he was furious about this, and then my colleague Pam Brown talked to a source familiar with all of this, and according to what she's reporting, the president, I believe, is apoplectic, I think is the word that's being used. He's still quite furious about this, feels that the Mueller investigation has overstepped its bounds. Another thing that we had heard last week from people who were close to these conversations, Anderson, we should point out, Mueller separated himself from what occurred in that Cohen raid, but it sounds like the president has not given up on this. It is under his skin, and my guess is that if the president is going to be asked about something critical tomorrow, it may be about his own personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, and exactly what he's worried about in terms of what the prosecutor's office there in New York and what the FBI may have seized in that raid, because obviously he seems very concerned about what took place there. I had talked to a source familiar with all of this, a White House official yesterday, who said that they were pleased with the judge's ruling in terms of what the prosecutor's office there in the Southern District of New York can have access to. But it seems that the president has not given up on this hostility, this anger towards what took place with his personal lawyer.
Yeah. And the White House, frankly, at this point, Sarah Sanders and Hogan Gidley, neither saying for a fact that Michael Cohen is still the president's personal lawyer. Not clear exactly what the status of their relationship is. Yeah.
We still don't have a straight answer on that. It has felt very much like the gang.